admit all the participants. Okay, so it's 3 p.m. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all our participants present here today. We are all set to begin with our today's webinar. HR Association of India, along with Marching Sheep, welcomes you all to the DNI series. Marching Sheep is an HR advisory firm founded in 2013 with an objective for enhancing profitability and productivity through customized and aligned people management processes, structures, leadership, and diversity interventions. It works with clients across industries on gender, generational, sexual orientation, and disability diversity. It has been adjudged among the top 5 global brands and leaders 2021 by DG Live, among top 25 HR firms in India by Business Connect, and among top 10 in Delhi NCR by Silicon India. To know more about HR Association of India and Marching Sheep, I would request all our participants to visit the link and details posted in the chat window. Request all the participants to kindly follow the webinar guidelines mentioned in the chat window. It's my privilege to introduce our guest for today, Ms. Charu Ahluwalia, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leader, Concentrix. Charu Ahluwalia is Global DEI Leader at Concentrix. She has close to 23 years of work experience in the BPO industry. She has been with Concentrix for 11 plus years, and prior to Concentrix have worked with companies like Aegis, BPO, and GE Capital. She has an extensive experience of HR leadership across verticals like HRBP, CSR, wellness, talent management, learning and development, operations, global mobility, and HR analytics, and reporting and proven ability to work effectively with stakeholders across a variety of organizational cultures. She believes in empowering people, an organization's greatest asset, strong interpersonal network and relationship based on mutual respect, business partnering relationship with management, and adding value to people and the organizations are her mantra. You can follow her on LinkedIn, and the link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Now I'll introduce the moderator for our today's session, Ms. Sonika Aaron, founder and managing partner, Marching Sheep. Ms. Sonika is among the most awarded HR advisory firms globally and has specialized into strategic HR advisory, diversity and inclusion interventions, employee health and wellness, along with capability building. She has recently been listed among the top 10 women entrepreneurs by Forbes India magazine, and Marching Sheep was nominated by UN Women for WEP Leadership Awards for their work during the pandemic towards gender equality, emotional well-being, and empowerment. She has worked with companies like PepsiCo, Vodafone, Roche Diagnostics, and ICI Paints in leadership roles before finding her own HR consulting firm. A mother of two, she decided to set up Marching Sheep in 2013 with a vision of making a difference to people's life and careers and driving respect and equality for all. As a human resource and DNI specialist with an experience of more than 20 years, both in the industry and consulting, she has designed one of the most evolved diversity and inclusion frameworks in India with deep understanding of real issues faced by women, individuals from LGBTQ community, and people from disability. Do feel free to follow her on LinkedIn. Details for the same are shared in the chat window. Without taking much time, I now welcome Miss Sonika Aaron to take over this session. Over to you, Miss Sonika. Miss Sonika, you are.
Thank you so much, Faisal. It is my absolute pleasure to be back here again, partnering with HRAI and doing this session for all of you, along with Charu, who happens to be a very dear friend. We've had long conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm sure that today, all of you will really benefit from her experience and her insights. So welcome, Charu. I think we are going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, Sonika. Just absolutely looking forward to it and my pleasure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, so let's just dive into it.
Yes.
So, Charu, let's start from a very personal question, right? And I do believe that working for DEI comes from a place of passion. So what does diversity, equity, and inclusion really mean to you? Where does this come from for you?
At a personal level, DI means so many things to me. It means being humane. It means being compassionate, celebrating, respecting, valuing and embracing differences. Acknowledging the fact that everyone has a right to lead a life of dignity, recognizing your own biases and ensuring that they don't exclude anyone, ensuring that every voice is heard, valued, respected. It also means creating those safe spaces that allow people to share the barriers that they're facing without worrying about being judged. It also means at a personal level to me, being curious, educating yourself through people's life stories, their journeys, their experiences. And I'd say last not the least, but the most important one, it is to be able to be your authentic self, right? So yeah, I know I wouldn't have given you any standard DEI definition probably, but yeah, that's what it means to me.
So I wasn't expecting a standard DEI definition, but tell me, you used words like humane, compassionate, respecting, lead a life of dignity. Now, some would argue that this is so much in contradiction to what an organization can be, right? An organization is all about rules, it's all about having a structure, it's all about one size fits all, and it is all about uh, driving numbers and accountability. And how do you be humane and compassionate and letting people be their authentic selves when we are driving and running behind targets and numbers and getting things done and achievement orientation? Isn't there a dichotomy there?
When I was thinking about this, and I might be digressing a bit from your question, but if I'm allowed to do so, because whenever we talk about DI, we usually talk about it at a corporate level, right? We say, well, organizations need to take targets, blah, blah, blah. How are you going to go about it? But I just personally believe that we all need to be sensitized, educated, spoken, and encouraged about it in our families during our childhood formative years, our education system. It should be seen in our friend circles so that it kind of becomes a part of our DNA. And then obviously there is an automatic inclination towards DEI in the society. And then you see that being embedded in the employment system naturally by default, there possibly, if that was the case, you and I possibly wouldn't be having this conversation. There wouldn't have been so much of effort required to go ahead and talk about it. And yet possibly what we see today is a not such a big shift. It's happening, but it's happening slowly. It's not happening at a pace or to a degree that we'd like it to be seen.
Huh.
Unfortunately, since that is not the case, the whole sensitization, the education, the appreciation really begins with organizations.
Yeah.
And when it happens at that stage, it takes time.
Yeah.
Right, because there's a lot of learning that one has to do. There's a lot of unlearning that one has to do. And by the time all of us begin working, we're already at a certain age group or a certain stages in our life, that there's certain things or aspects of our life which is quite set. So I believe it is not tough, but if we really want to make really big strides generally in the society, then it needs to begin much, much more earlier. Otherwise, it does get tougher, when you really begin talking about it only at the employment stage or within organizations. Because organizations are a very one small part, like very significant part, but just one part of the whole ecosystem that we have, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I hope I kind of answered your question there.
Absolutely, and you're bang on. I think even what HRAI put in the post, that organizations are but a subsystem of or a subunit of the society. End of the day, our leaders, our employees, our managers all come from the society, and until and unless we embed this entire concept from the time a child is born, the time when, at the education, when, on 25th February, this child took his own life because he was getting bullied in school, and the school refused to take ownership. So that is where this should start. Otherwise, we will continue to struggle at the organization level. And yes, a change will be slow. So, today, let's accept that the pandemic has made the world a smaller place. Today, it is so much easier to connect and work with people across the globe. I know that in your team, you are working with people in the US and across all geographies. You work in the evenings practically.
Yes.
So now from that perspective, when we are working with such a diverse set of cultures and people and thought processes, how challenging it now becomes, because now we are not just talking one geography. How challenging does it become to implement DEI at a global level where everybody is talking a different language, everybody is talking different statutes or different nuances or different focus areas?
For a moment, if I was to not look at DEI as a metric, because it is not, it is a journey. It is very effort and intensive journey, right? The efforts that you're going to put in today would eventually show results in 6 months. So when you're dealing with the scale and size of an organization which is spread across multiple countries, one size doesn't fit all for sure. Right? The culture nuances of each country are different, and hence the approach has to be different. While, of course, the goals remain common, the DI goals remain common, but the approach needs to be customized. You need to really understand, what the people are saying, what the people are expecting, what is the help, what is the support that's needed. And I believe when you're able to do all of that, and then all of this takes time, because reaching out to people, gathering feedback, gathering inputs, understanding, and then customizing those solutions to each of the regions or countries or geos, that takes a lot of time. So while many might just call it a challenge, I don't think it is a challenge. It is the process that needs to be taken. Unlike any other metric, whereby maybe, if you put the measurables today, you can possibly begin measuring them from tomorrow onwards, and in another week's time, it will show you whether you're doing well or not. And maybe in a month's time, you definitely, with all the right procedures and processes, because you're dealing with people. You're talking about behaviors. You're talking about people to open up about the barriers that they've experienced. You're talking about people being open to their experiences. You're asking people to be able to share their personal identities. Again, all of this is not easy. You need to be able to create that environment, that space that makes everyone feel very, very comfortable to be able to do so. And then come to that stage of sharing and really believing that, yes, this is serious. The intent is very positive. It is not a checkmark exercise for an organization. This is something that the leadership and the executive team is really thinking to take that up very, very seriously.
Yeah.
So, not a challenge, but definitely a journey.
So, Charu, you make some very beautiful points which I want audience to make note of. So first of all, you said that, it is really not a DEI metric. It's a process. It's a process of effort and intent. You also spoke very beautifully about, having to know the people of the geography where you're working. So, you spoke about curiosity in the first question. You said, you need to be curious and you need to understand. And I find that very often organizations skip that step. They straight away get into, we want to revamp our policies and make them more inclusive. Or we want to have X number of this underrepresented group in our workforce, or we want to have sessions around unconscious bias or allyship or XYZ. But they will not first spend time on, let's say, doing a thorough diagnostic and understanding what is it that my current demographic is, what generation they are from, what are their life stages. So help me understand that, what did you do to understand how each geography of yours was different and what were their needs?
Yeah. See, it was obvious that it was different, right? Because all of us, most of us as leaders work with various diverse teams. So there is no brainer around that. But I believe as we kind of charted out this journey, the first step was really to understand what are people feeling. Were they comfortable talking about their barriers? Were they comfortable talking about their experiences and thoughts around things that have impacted their well-being? A lot has happened in the last 2 years also when the George Floyd death happened. The situation in US became very, very different. Then with COVID happening, a lot of, attacks on Asian Americans. Yes. And even across the world, there have been incidents that have been happening that we keep seeing or listening about. I believe the most important thing is to be able to listen. And at times you do hear things that you feel that, oh, we don't think we do that. We don't think that's the way it is here. But I believe one just has to be open enough to let people be vulnerable, because it takes a certain amount of trust for people to come forth, open up with their vulnerabilities and share what they're feeling, share the experiences that made them excluded, share the experiences that didn't make them feel good. Or talking about support or help that needs. I think most of us, I believe, are not really very good at asking for help or support. Yeah. We like to be very, very self-reliant and absolutely independent. So I guess that was the first thing. The other thing that, what we called as was really a campaign of listening circles that we did over a period of few months. The other very important thing was that in few regions, we did culture of belonging survey. To begin with. And since we're very huge, we couldn't have covered all in one go, but we did cover 3 regions. And we really heard what our employees are really saying.
Right.
whether it was in terms of psychological safety, whether it was their experiences, whether what's the kind of help and support that they need. And obviously that included very specifically comments and feedback from people from unrepresented communities. And that those data points were very, very important, you know. And then coupled with that, I'd say we also began looking at data, which I feel is always, always very powerful. There's an aspect of dashboards and scorecards which tell you where you are. Then data analytics really tell you, it kind of helps you connect the dots with where you want to be and what's the gap.
Yeah.
And then as you talk to people, they tell you why is it missing and the what part of it which is missing. And when you put all of these three data points together, it gives you direction to chart out your own strategy as an organization. Broadly, yes, we knew what our strategy is, what our goals are. But yes, as you kind of look into all of this information, it just helps you customize it and kind of sharpen your focus a lot more.
Yes, I hear you. And I do recall that very recently when we were doing those interventions, Charu reached out to me and she said, can we have a speaker from LATAM? Because LATAM as a region is very different, culturally very different. Their nuances are very different along the life stages for women. So can we have a speaker from there, because they will have a different perspective on gender diversity and the life stage navigation.
Yeah.
So I think hearing people and understanding that what they need and catering to that is very critical when you make your strategy. And also, when she says that it is, chasing a metric versus the process and intent, it is very, very critical. If we track the process and intent versus that goal, I think we would be far better off in our DEI journey, because if we do our process with the right intent, the journey, the results will happen on their own. If we create those safe spaces, if we are curious, if we customize our support system after listening to people, is what I hear you say, Charu.
Yes, and absolutely. And I do want to add here, Sonika, that, which is one of the biggest initiatives, which is really opening up a series of conversations that we, of course, do in partnership with Marching Sheep on a monthly basis. And ensuring that every month that a conversation that we open up and the speakers that we bring in really help people understand that, one, we are intentional about it. Secondly, as people open up and share their own experiences, ask questions, counter questions, it just gives everyone a very, very productive and a safe space to interact.
Yeah.
And there is so much of learning, unlearning, thought sharing that happens in the process, and a lot of reflection moments. And I believe they do make a huge difference. They do make a huge difference. You do realize, I just always felt, even when we started with this initiative, that this has to be a constant thing, right? Because as much as you learn from people's stories, backgrounds, journeys, experiences, opinions, views, it's far more impressional than if one was to go through a module on it. And I'm not saying by any ways or means that that's not important, but I just feel that there are a lot more reflection points as you have those conversations. And as you continuously keep on having them, you are reiterating certain points. You're embedding that by default within the organization. So I believe that was one big step that we took, which was really, really helpful for us as well.
Yeah. Okay, so next question, business priorities. Yeah. So how does DEI or driving diversity get a place on the table when there are competing business priorities, there are numbers to be met, there are targets to be met, projects to be completed. How do you make it just as important?
Mm-hmm. A part of the answer lies in the question itself, Sonika. Like any other business deliverable or initiative, DI needs to be priority and it needs to be important. So I believe the moment you do that, it gets a seat on the table. It really helps when senior executive teams have it as a part of their goals. When you see diversity within the senior leadership teams, uh, you know, uh, and obviously an organization does need DI goals. It does need DI strategy because it kind of lays down that framework of very clearly what we want to achieve as an organization. But I'd say that, if it needs as much important as any other business metric, it needs to be driven like that as well, which means that you'd need teams, you'd need structures, you'd need tools, you'd need support system, mechanism established to be able to support that. You'd also need a very periodic review and governance mechanism, like we would do on any other metric, to really see how we are progressing, what's the gap, what is the help or support that's really required or needed. Again, I'd say on a periodic basis, it is very, very important to be really able to understand and hear from the employees time and time again. And you could have various means of or modes of doing that. You could do listening circles, you could do culture of belonging survey. It could be a part of your employee ESAT that happens. There could be various modes, and I'm like, you've got SRGs, which is staff resource groups or employee resource groups, as it is called in many organizations, who really help you catch that pulse. And once you're able to do all of that, I believe it will be a priority, and as an organization, whatever numbers or targets that one has charted out, one would by default meet them. But it just needs to possibly follow the same process. If it does, more often than not, the chances are that you'd meet what you have set out to achieve as your DI targets or goals as well.
Charu, often we get a pushback saying that we do not have separate budgets for DEI. Mm-hmm. Why do you think there needs to be a separate budget for DEI, and it is often an impoverished budget? Mm-hmm. And here I'm talking, so let me give you a couple of verbatim, so I don't have a DEI budget. I will have to ask if I need to do something, on sensitization, or if I have to do something, if, reasonable accommodation, if we are doing something for people with disability or the LGBTQ community, or if we have to do something like create a pipeline of, let's say, women GETs, or anything. So that's one. The second is that, okay, we've done this. Now we need we've taken a target. We need to be 25% women workforce by end of 2025. We are in a traditional culture. Now we have to take approval from the top management, but we need to present it in a manner that we get the budgets for DEI. Now, it seems to me it is like an HR budget. It is like something which is separate. It's like an add-on. It is not something which has been bought by the business as something which is a need to do, but something which is being imposed by HR that it has to be done. So what advice would you give to HR? How do you make them understand that it is not an add-on, it is a must?
Yeah, it is. And, while I'm all for all the budgets that people ask for, but I believe my first and foremost point to everyone is that don't start with the budgets as the first thing. Don't let that be a roadblock, because more often than not, people just say that, oh, are we going to get budgets? oh, this is a separate initiative? Or do you think anyone is going to support us? And I'm saying that you've not even started, you know? And unfortunately, we didn't come across that sort of kind of organization at all. One, because it's clearly driven from the top. We clearly understand that it is important. At the same point in time, even as DEI team or people solutions team, as we call as HR team is called in concentrics, we also realize that we need certain structure to be set up first. There is a lot more to be done prior to any one of us going and really asking for budgets. And trust me, whenever we asked for that, we've got it. But the point is this, that as leaders and as team members, we need to ask that ourselves. Do we have a strategy? Do we know what we want to achieve? Do we understand how we want to achieve? Whether you want to do listening circles or voice or knowing what your people are really saying, or to really understand where we are today and where we want to get to, or to start conversations within the organizations, or to celebrate diversity that exists within our organization. A lot of these things don't need budgets. Yes, there are a lot of other things that need budgets as well when you want to do something very specific. Let's say if you want to get a platform in place, if you really want to engage with a partner who can really support you in this journey, if you really want to head out and do some meaningful research and study and work, because possibly that's not the expertise or the skill or the capability that sits or resides within the organization. But I'm saying that all of that needs to be a part of a really big structure that you're creating. That's not the first thing that I think that, oh, well, I'm part of DI team. Do we have budgets? No. You really start with creating the framework. You start with creating the structure. You start with looking at data. You start with talking to people. You start with looking into your own policies and procedures. You start at looking at, okay, how do I customize them? How do I incorporate what my people are saying? Once you do all of that, and trust me, none of that happens overnight. None of that happens in a week's time. None of that happens in a month's time. It takes quite a bit of time to get there, And if you are a bit creative, you would realize that there are ways and means to do a lot of things effectively and very effectively, even without budgets. And again, I'm saying, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that for us to do certain things, we shouldn't go and ask for budgets. No, I'm not saying that. But as a leader, I'm definitely saying that, know what do you want to achieve? All of us has a network through LinkedIn. All of us have our personal social networks through which we know a lot of people. A lot of times I have picked up the phone and spoken to you about something that I possibly needed an understanding on. A lot of times I've reached out to my mentors, to figure out that, oh, well, this is what we want to do as an organization, or this is what we want to achieve. This is the thought process that I have. Do you think there is a better way to do that?
Right.
And more often than not, you realize that there are a lot of things that you can do without budget. It's just that I believe at times we're just so used to and in the habit of saying, oh, can we get the budgets? Do we have the budgets? That becomes the starting point. Rather, I say that, that one really gets to the budget in the journey much after midway. That's where you'd really need, because there is a certain evolution that we need to go through to really reach to that point. But that's my absolutely personal belief.
You are absolutely, because I also feel that there is so much that can be done that does not need money. Let's go back to the process and intent. That if we start speaking to people, if we start understanding their needs, if we start tweaking our policies to make them more inclusive, start changing the tone of our communication, which does not need anything, right? And start working on our recruitment strategy and so many things which can be done, which don't need a budget.
Yeah.
They just need the right intent, the right direction. And then along the way, you can figure out where do you, whatever budget you get, what is your priority and where do you want to put it?
Exactly. Exactly.
So absolutely, I get your point. So I think we've covered that how do you get the leadership on board with D&I initiatives, and you said that it should be part of their goals and it should be coming from the top. But in case there is the leadership team which resists it, and it is clearly seen as an HR baby, how do we overcome that?
I guess you need to understand why that resistance is there. That's very important. Is it because it is another target or a goal that's given to business by HR teams? And then they're supposed to be driving it all by themselves and achieving it? Or do they have any sort of challenges in really achieving to that? So I believe it is very important to understand why that resistance before we really go about beating the business, saying that, you know what, they don't support, they always resist. Because more often than not, whatever team that you're part of, if you are an enabling function supporting business, you should be able to take the baton and run with them. Right? It shouldn't be that you just pass on the baton saying, oh, well, these are the goals, these are the targets, you got to ensure that you achieve it, and we will come and review it on a monthly basis. No, it doesn't work like that. Right? You need to be able to figure out the pulse of their employees. You need to be able to figure out this is what the employees are saying. This is the kind of support that they're seeking. And hence, these are the solutions that we are recommending or proposing, and get into a conversation with them, right? And I believe when it happens like that, more often than not, business agrees and supports and partners and collaborates, right? The only time I can foresee resistance is when it is just another thing that's passed on to them and saying that, oh, well, please go ahead and ensure that you meet these targets as well. Otherwise, of course, what this need in terms of support is who's going to sensitize and educate, you know, who's going to provide us the visibility to how we are progressing on that. You know, is there any industry benchmarks or surveys or research that's available that can help us understand this better? These are the kind of questions that I've come across. Is there going to be any communication? Is there going to be any sort of marketing campaign? You know, which all teams are collaborating around this? And when you really come across these questions, I believe these are very, very valid questions for any business to ask us. Because what they're in turn asking is that, you know, well, we are in the game with you, but we would need the support. And as a DI team or people solutions team, as you extend that support, I have seen businesses always participate.
Charu, one question here. Very often, some of the industries where typically D&I has started late. Let's not talk about BFSI or BPOs or IT industry where the diversity index is high. But let's talk about infrastructure or manufacturing or auto industry, where typically your diversity index is low. Now, very often, the question we are asked is that what's happening in other companies? And very often the turnaround is that, okay, this is what is happening in other companies, but why can't we be the first? Right? So what if other companies in this sector are not giving paternity leave? Or are not hiring people with disabilities, or are not hiring LGBTQ. So Tata Steel, of course, broke that silence and has been hiring transgenders in their factories. So that, of course, has been a big push for a lot of manufacturing companies. But that has always been this sectoral question that in our industry, has there been a precedent? But someone's got to be the first one. Otherwise, isn't it groupthink if we keep on curtailing ourselves on, oh, nobody else has done in our industry, so we are okay?
Yeah, I won't really think of it like that, that just because no one has done anything, it's okay. A lot of time this question is asked more to understand some of the best practices that exist, especially in organizations where possibly DI has come much later in the journey. So they would want to understand that, whether it is the same industry, what is happening, are there some best practices that we can pick up, understand, and see what are the merits in doing so. More often than not, that gives a lot of food of thought as well, saying that, oh, well, these seem interesting, but we can do it like that also. We need not do exactly like that. It need not pick up the exact best practice, but maybe tweak it to your own organization or your own region for that matter. And a lot of times, yes, so I'd say there is no one thing that happens. A lot of times you pick up best practices. A lot of time you tweak what you hear. A lot of time, basis what you hear your employees saying, you say that, well, it's okay if it does not happen in other organizations, let's still do it. Let's be the first one. And a lot of times you might just pick up practices that happen in absolutely different industries, absolutely different sectors, but you believe that that can happen within your own organization or whatever industry that you're part of. So I believe it is just a combination of all of that happens, depending upon what suits an organization the best. More, but I truly believe that often when people ask for surveys or research or best practices, it is because one, they'd need food for thought, or they would need certain practices that can possibly, if they're good, then why not implement that in the organization as well? Those become some of the low-hanging fruits at times, to really understand.
Got it. So, what would be your top 3 priorities on D&I for this year and why?
Our top 3, very, very clearly articulated, rather, we've got 4 as an organization. One, clearly ensuring that our whole of our talent acquisition team, they're trained on inclusive sourcing. Also ensuring that 100% of our people managers are trained, complete DI specific training. Of course, the primary emphasis is on equipping people managers and recruiters with inclusion behaviors. So it's very, very critical because they become the touch points of anyone who comes into the organization, and people managers, of course, because they manage the set of teams which obviously are diverse by default. Second, and I'd say third one, is really to ensure that all of our countries have 25% senior manager and above from unrepresented communities. Again, the priority focus is on improving the presence of the unrepresented communities at leadership positions. Because more often than not, you do see that, even if you've got representation of unrepresented communities, they are more often than are at junior levels. So that's another primary focus. Last but not the least is to ensure that we increase our current 100% increase in our current spend on diverse suppliers, which is to ensure that, yes, we want to be socially conscious as an organization, and we want to promote inclusive procurement as well. So these are our goals from 2022 to 2025 that we want to achieve. And then, yes, there are steps within the organization that we've already begun. And then, yeah, and it's got the leadership and the executive team focus. So yes, we do ensure that we track it very, very closely.
And the beauty of these goals is that for every geography, for example, their underrepresented people can be as per their geography and their demographics.
Absolutely.
So there is so much, while there is an umbrella statement, there is so much scope for localization.
Yes, absolutely. And see, so when you talk about unrepresented communities, there are various aspects that kind of get included. You include women, you include people with disabilities, you look at people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds, you look at people with different sexual orientation, different genders. And depending upon what the focus, and also within various countries and regions, you'd see some doing well on something or another.
Yeah.
So it's really for them to choose which is the area that they want to focus on, which really is something that needs to be strengthened within that country or within that region, because the umbrella is so big. You could just simply focus on the areas and then decide on the ones where you feel that you need to work more on.
Absolutely. So for all the audience here, for those who might want to embark on a DEI journey in their organizations, what would be your advice to them?
I'd say things to do, very basic. I'll begin with that. Be curious. It just more often than not takes you towards right questions and figuring out right set of information. Educate yourself. That's very important before you even reach out. I had to do quite a bit of that when I joined DI team to really understand and ensure that, when I'm talking to people, I understand the nuances of LGBTQIA, the nuances of various gender that exists, understanding more about ethnic minorities. And you could have your own ways of figuring that out. You could listen to podcasts, you could listen to a lot of, you could go through a lot of videos on YouTube, you could go through some basic trainings, which are through learning modules. You could do that by really engaging in conversations with people of different backgrounds. The other big thing I'll say is, while a lot of us have been trained on unconscious bias training, I'd still say that be conscious of your own biases. It is easier said than done. It needs a lot of conscious effort. And embrace diversity of all kinds around you. It could be gender, sexual orientation, ethnic minorities, diversity of experience, thoughts, backgrounds, everything. Just totally embrace it. Things not to do. Do not make DEI a checklist, check in the box activity, because that just completely kills the whole experience and purpose. And it won't help achieve anything. By the end of the day. So don't do that. But yeah, I believe it is just as simple as that, maybe to begin with.
And when you say be curious, what do you recommend? Listening circles or FGDs? How should they really start? And then what next?
I know at times it just begins with a few questions in your mind, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of times I have gotten into those conversations with my boss, who's a Black African American, and I would talk about privilege, and I'd say that, okay, I don't experience so much of that sitting in India. Is that just something that is spoken a lot more about in US? What does that really mean? Do people really understand? So you ask questions. You also read about the same subject, and then of course you get into conversation. So you need to know what is it that you want to know about. When I really started in the DI team, I really wanted to understand every single letter, what it means in LGBTQIA.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the various genders? So that as you're talking or addressing anyone of a different gender, then a man or a woman, I'm ensuring that I'm respectful enough. A lot of times it is not just about that, oh, I have the information. It is also because you'd be interacting in this space with people from different backgrounds. So there is a certain amount of sensitization that you need to have yourself if you are a DI professional. A lot of times I've also spoken to my own team members who happen to have either family members or children, who happen to be from different backgrounds or different orientations. And it's just helped me so much because I was like, okay, I don't understand this. And so I guess that's the way you could you could really learn a lot of that stuff. But yes, that curiosity starts from your own mind, right? You need to know what is it that you want to ask and know. And I guess Google helps, YouTube helps. These two tools are always there. Yeah. So the moment a question pops up, those are the first two things that you could obviously do.
Yeah, super. So we all know that every small step, and thought counts. So while we wait for the world to accept and change, how can every individual, each one of us here, contribute and become a change maker in our personal lives, professional lives? And I promise this is the last question. From me at least, then the audience will open up.
Absolutely. No. I'd say first and the foremost, make an attempt to know someone who's different from you. We all usually are, most of the times in our lives, associate so much with people who are like us, friends like us, and colleagues who are like us. And, it's just that familiarity is just so contagious at times, right? It's just a very automatic way for all of us to connect. So make a conscious attempt to do that. It just enriches your life, if nothing else, I promise that. Be an ally. Be an ally. If there's something that you really feel strongly about, be an ally, whether it is people from different genders, ethnic minorities, people of different sexual orientations. Support in a truly meaningful way. Just don't call yourself an ally. I'd say thirdly, stand up against discrimination, whether it is towards you or someone else. I believe that's if you want the world to change, that's one thing that you can definitely do. Call out anytime you see microaggressions happening within your team, outside your teams, around you. Or even generally, I'll go back to my initial comment that, a lot of things that we're talking about in an organization context, but a lot of this needs to be practiced in our daily lives, because all of a sudden you don't become a different person when you walk into an organization, right? So yeah, practice all of that in your life. It definitely enriches you and make you a better person for sure.
I completely agree. I think each one of us has a circle of influence, right?
Absolutely.
And if we start making this change in our circle of influence, and these circle of influence intersect.
Yes, right.
And, from our friends, our colleagues, our family, and we start talking this language, the words that you used, humane, compassionate, respecting, feeling that everybody has a right to live a life of dignity, allowing for every voice to be heard, allowing for safe spaces, allowing people to be their authentic selves.
Yes.
And without being judgmental, if we see some microaggression happening, even in our communities,
Exactly.
Just a very simple example, my daughter goes out to play soccer, and there were these older children bullying the younger child, and my daughter came and told me, and I raised it. Now, it's a very small example, but I'm saying that it's an example where that child got pulled up for bullying, and the parents got sensitized that their child was bullying.
Yeah.
And it's a ripple effect. The
Exactly.
younger children got the message that they could speak up against bullying.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that is where, because once a bully, the child would have grown up to be a bullying manager.
Yes.
And these children would have grown up to feel that they don't have a voice against a bullying manager.
Yes, yes, agree, totally.
So let's not keep quiet. I mean, if you see something which is inappropriate, which is discriminatory, I think we can all exercise that. And we are all privileged. We all have a voice. And we should exercise that. Yes, Charu, you want to say something?
No, totally agree, Sonika. And then I truly believe, I guess, organization is one aspect of our lives and a very, very critical aspect. And we do have a great influence and ability, but outside of that, the life that we lead is equally important. And as we be conscious of that life as well, I believe what you do, being a part of an organization, that kind of flows very, very smoothly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super. So thank you so much, Charu. I loved our conversation as always. And thank you so much for sharing some beautiful insights, lovely experience sharing, candid thoughts. I'm sure our audience is taking away a lot. I will keep quiet now, but Faisal, Peter, if the audience have any questions, so open for questions now.
Before we move into the Q&A session, we will be initiating the poll. Request all participants to kindly share your feedback. While doing so, request all participants to kindly post their questions in the chat window. So we'll wait a little while for if in case participants are having any questions, and then we can close.
I'm getting some comments, but no questions so far.
Yes. So that's fine. Thank you, Ms. Sonika, for moderating this session so beautifully and methodically. Thank you, Ms. Charu, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences on this important topic. D&I have always been a topic young HR professionals want to know more about, and this intriguing session will exactly be what they want. It has been a pleasure being with you today. I'm sure our participants have had a lot to learn and take away from this session. This would not have been possible without Marching Sheep, where we are privileged to be working with them on this series. I once again thank our dear speaker and Ms. Sonika for joining us today. Do join us tomorrow for our next DNI session with Ms. Richa Singh, AVP HR, Max Life on 15th March 2022 at 3 p.m. That's it from our today's webinar. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care and bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
I did see two questions though, Sonika and Faisal. One was around DI matrix, and
yeah,
there were two questions that came up.
Go ahead, Charu.
Yeah, we can,
Yeah, so I'll just go through that question. The one is that what kind of DI matrix, if I read that right, a lot of them, they could be DI matrix that could just be absolutely on representation that you want to measure. What are the goals that as an organization one has taken and how are you faring against that? There could also be goals on learning. And there could also be goals on how many people of diverse group get supported in terms of L&D, the growth, the promotion, the age groups, the attrition, the retention, how many diverse folks that we are hiring from outside. So there are lots of metrics depending upon what data is available to you within your organization you could look into all of that. You could also look into how widely spread is your network of employee resource groups. How many members and allies are there, and what kind of events and activities that they're doing. So these are some of the metrics that I can share with you. Any reference material to refer for measurements? I'd say if you'd Google, I won't remember any material just off the head, but yes, if you would just Google DEI dashboards, you would find a lot of material, Arlene. You'd find a lot of material. Indian Organization on Hidden Disabilities, apart from disabilities which everyone can see. So the question is that, I'm not really sure if I understand what the question is, but I do understand that what you're trying to ask about is hidden disabilities or invisible disabilities. Yes. First of all, you need to understand how well that data is getting captured within the organization. Look at tools and technologies and accommodations and assistance that some of those employees, if you have already within the organization, that they would need. If there are any changes that might be required in your organization's policy to support them better. Yeah, and I think those are broadly few things that I could share if you were to really support. And also if there are any specific measures that the organization wants to take to hire anyone who's got invisible disabilities from outside of the organization, but one just has to ensure that, yes, as an organization, we are ready to support them as we hire more and more of them.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Sonia.
So, Sanyog, there are like these multiple organizations. So, for example, there is Leprosy Mission of India. That's a hidden disability. Then there are other, for example, for multiple sclerosis, that's a hidden disability. Then there are multiple NGOs that work in mental health. Now, all of these organizations also help individuals get hired. So, for example, specifically for people with disabilities, there is atypical advantage. There is Vividta. These are some of the names which are coming off my this thing, where these companies and CareerNet. These companies help people get hired. They also help organizations, the managers, sensitized on what would be, and there is DEOC, which is a company started by Ankit Rai Jaiswal, who is himself visually impaired, where they help companies with what would be the reasonable accommodations for people with hidden disabilities like mental health, dyslexia, ADHD, or any other hidden disability. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ms. Sonika. Thank you, Ms. Charu, for taking up the questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we can end the session now, and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Sonika. I just want to thank HR AI and Sonika for giving me this opportunity to come in and share my views. So thank you one more time.
And thank you for being there. I totally love chatting with you, and I hope the audience.
Same here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.